Good afternoon. Some of you might have seen or heard about the recent French film Dix Milliards de Mondes, called 10 Billion Worlds in its English translation, which was a modest success in France, but after being released in limited theaters in North America the same weekend as Avengers: Infinity War, quickly vanished. The movie, an overlong sci-fi CGI spectacular, is not very interesting on its own terms, but its source material does merit some comment. This source, as far back as we can trace it, is in the 5th century BC, with the Greek tragedian Aristarchus and his lost play, Ulixus. What little we know of this play comes from a brief mention in Aristotle, although the myth itself is recounted later in Ovid's Metamorphoses. The story goes like this. Ulixus, a warrior hero exiled from his own city and pursued by his political enemies, comes to the city-state of Gythion as a suppliant. The king of Gythion, sensing an opportunity, agrees to grant Ulixes asylum and marry him to his daughter Melita, if he will adventure into a nearby cave system and kill its resident monster, an amphisbena, a giant serpent with a head on both ends, which has been carrying off people and livestock. Ulixus agrees, descends into the underworld, and returns with the creature's heads. But the king, who seeks an alliance with Ulixes' enemies, serves him a meal which has been dosed with poison from the fangs of the slain beast. Unfortunately, the king's 2 young sons also sneak some of the dinner meat, and they die along with Ulixus. Melita, who loved him, collapses into inconsolable weeping until the goddess Aphrodite, pitying her, transforms her into a sea-dwelling fish so that her vision will remain clear even through her tears. Classical scholar Matthew Wright describes Aristarchus' play as, among the lost, one of the most lost. Not one word of it survives. We are unsure which elements of the myth were dramatized by Aristarchus. Was it Ulixes' arrival and the slaying of the monster, or was it the king's treachery and Melita's grief? If the play was performed as part of a trilogy, it's possible that all of the myth might have been dramatized over the course of the 3 parts. A play on the same subject, possibly based on the Aristarchian text or texts, was written by the Roman playwright Pacuvius around 120 BC. Following Ovid's usage, Pacuvius refers to our hero not as Ulixis, but by the Latinized name Velixus. According to ancient sources, Pacuvius' play, also regrettably lost, incorporated all of the mythological elements described by Ovid, resulting in a rather rushed dramatic experience and a consequent loss of characterization. By contrast, the next notable treatment of the myth, the Mélisée of 1720 AD, almost 1300 years later, written by the French dramatist Jean-Guilbert de Campistron, is a minor masterpiece. Campistron chooses to keep the focus primarily on the character of Melita, in this version, Melissa, and her tragic romantic relationship with Velixus, relegating the supernatural and political elements to the sidelines, although mystical snake venom is once again what does our hero in. Capistron's play, not well known in the Anglosphere, was popular in France in its day, inspiring a grand opera by Meyerbeer in 1825 and a long poem by Victor Hugo in 1870, both of which are pretty faithful renditions of Capistron's basic story. The same cannot be said for the series of low-budget films put out by the notorious French producer Georges Lavoie from 1960 to 1964. Conceived of as a local response to the popularity of the Italian Hercules and Maciste sword and sandals films, the Velixus series follows our hero on his adventures throughout the ancient world, as he slays minotaurs and griffins and chimeras and many, many large snakes, and seduces many nubile maidens, yet somehow always remaining constant, in his heart at least, to the regal Melissa, Princess of Sparta, whose devious and untrustworthy father remains a permanent vexation. Film critic Paul Sanssouci, reviewing the 4th film in the series, Velixus versus the Parthians, described the actress playing Melissa as ornamental only, and Velixus himself as 100 kilos of bai in a 90-kilo package of butch, which I'm not sure I completely understand, but which sounds about right. There's an interesting side note here, if you'll follow my digression. Several years after the last film in the Velixus series, Lavoie made some effort to launch a Franco-American co-production of the story. The basic elements of the series would have remained the same, but it would have been slightly higher budget and focused more on softcore pornographic elements, featuring topless models from the French magazine Louis and Lavoie's own pet boa constrictor Dino. His proposed screenwriter was the American novelist Philip Roth, with whom he was friendly. But Roth lost interest after the phenomenal success of his 1969 novel Portnoy's Complaint, preferring to concentrate on his own books, and Lavoie descended into an amphetamine-fueled paranoid decline, and the project was scrapped. This is probably for the best. In 1979, the Velixus story reappeared as a serialized adventure in the illustrated magazine Heavy Metal under the name A Million Hells. Written by Michel Beltran with art by Mobius, the comic followed the basic quest and romance structure of the film series, although now Velixus traveled and adventured through a psychedelic landscape admixed of pastel-colored historical, fantastic, and science-fictional elements. The Princess Melissa, with whom Velixus is eternally in love, is in this version actually dead, although he can communicate with her spirit via a certain sinister cobra with 4 jewels instead of eyes, owned by her evil father, and which he uses to pressure Velixus to go on dubious assignments. Incidentally, there is a brief reference to this comic series in a song on the 1985 album Rage for Order by the heavy metal band Queensryche. Running sporadically in the magazine until 1988, this Velixus was optioned by the TF1 group in 1995 and was slated to appear on film several times. At one point, it was to star Armand Assante and Julie Strain. But international co-financing fell through in the wake of the 2000, 2003, and 2007 recessions, after which the project seemed permanently dead. But that is not dead which can eternal lie, as Velixus proclaimed during his sword fight with the priests of Cthulhu in the fall 1998 issue of Heavy Metal. And a new film, produced by Luc Besson's EuropaCorps and starring no one you've ever heard of, was announced in Variety in November 2016, at a time when no one in the world was paying any attention. The final product, basically okay, but more space opera than Mobius's trippy comic book fantasy, is notable for gender swapping the lead roles. Velixus is now Valerie, and Melissa is now Mark, and for recapturing some of the details of the original Greek story. The plot, which is a little hard to summarize quickly, goes something like this. Valerie, fleeing in her personal spaceship from a galactic war that has destroyed her home planet, rescues Mark from certain death at the hands of space pirates, after which he takes her home to the planet Amphisba to meet Dad. Dad turns out to be the evil mastermind behind the whole war, although our heroes don't know that yet, and he appoints Val as his special operative and sends her on a hazardous mission into grimdark areas of space haunted by death ships and multi-headed space serpents and the like. Mark, forbidden to accompany her, does so anyway, and the two of them are soon joined by a traumatized soldier, a devious sleight of hand man, and a wisecracking CGI frog. It's all a little like Guardians of the Galaxy until they return to Mark's home planet, and it becomes more like Blake's 7, when Dad poisons every main character except his son, who then has to bring Val back to life with super science in a weirdly short and unsatisfying sequence, like, what was that all about? And then the two of them blow up the palace before escaping into the world's ocean in a giant semi-sentient techno-organic dolphin ship, declaring themselves revolutionaries and vowing to resurrect the rest of the crew in the sequel, even the frog. Oh, also, spoilers, sorry about that. Whether there will be a sequel remains to be seen, but this old story does seem to be an enduringly popular one, and I look forward to whatever reboot or rebirth comes next. I'm sure we haven't seen the last of this archetypal tale, which, after all, gave the world the famous phrase, "Serpents called Amphisbaeni to Velixus are ferocious." Thank you, and good day.